Hi guys, Sleepy Reader here again, reviewing or thinking about a few more comics. Can't seem to stop. Mind the Gap, #1. I picked that up just recently because I saw a lot of videos about it that made me intrigued. Um, Secret Service #1 and Secret Service #2. Also something I was a bit late to pick up. Grabbed it when I realized it was art by Dave Gibbons, and a quick glance at it made that art look very good. And then Ragemoor #3, I finally dug up Ragemoor #2, and so I read those together. I'd read Ragemoor #1 digitally. I have to say, so Ragemoor is drawn by Richard Corbin, written by Jan Strnad. Anyway, those two have worked together before. Richard Corbin, in particular, is someone who still I can get a little excited about. A long time ago, he was kind of this obscure, legendary, underground comic book cartoonist. During one of my early phases of being really obsessed by comics, I used to dig up old underground comics at head shops and find Richard Corbin bizarre science fiction things. Back then, his art style was very unique. No one else had a style like his. I think the times have caught up to him a bit more. He had a airbrushed style that people can now do digitally. Back in the day when all comic books were just very flat and uninteresting, he was the only one. You can see these covers are really beautiful. The first issue, the one that I have digitally, so I can't really show it to you easily, has the most beautiful art of these three, and afterwards, particularly issue 2, Corbin seems to be going downhill a bit. I should say that I probably originally found him in, I think he did a lot of European comics too, and I originally found him in heavy metal. Lately, I think he's been showing up in Hellboy and doing some Ghost Rider, and I think he even did a little bit of some recent Conans. But with Jan Strnad doing their more kind of underground, just weird alternative comics thing, I think that's really where he belongs. Here's someone being sacrificed to some strange kind of grub polyp creatures. So the whole idea of Ragemoor is these people. It's kind of like a Edgar Allan Poe story. These people live in this bizarre castle that's evil and has been controlling their lives and won't let them go. And in the first issue, along comes someone who thinks he's gonna, steal the castle away from its heirs and plunder its riches. And that person quickly gets his just desserts, and someone else goes insane. So it seemed like after issue 1 that there was nowhere to go. The story was already over. But they very cleverly find new places to go. In issue 2, we have our hero, the guy who lives in Ragemoor. Now I'm trying to remember his name. Herbert. And he's in love with Honoria. But we quickly find out Honoria is not in love with him. And we just get all kinds of weird. Honoria's gone insane and is hiding in the castle, and there's I don't know. I shouldn't even try to cover the plot. I don't want to give away too much, but we learn things like that the servants are giant insects that are kind of mindless, and if you're not careful, they'll bite you. And then there are all these baboons around the castle and grounds, and the baboons seem to have skulls for heads rather than regular baboon heads. I'm not sure what that's about. Everything just gets more and more bizarre, but in a kind of compelling way. You can see it's black and white, but it's very beautiful black and white. So if you're in the market for really weird stories, like I am, I think Ragemoor is something to pick up. Maybe it's on the 3rd issue of 4, so maybe wait for the trade, or if you if you find a store where you can grab all of them at once. Um, I mean, if you're a fan of Richard Corbin, definitely get it. Corbin still can do some really interesting stuff. It's very trippy and very creepy. It's kind of Edgar Allan Poe meets a bad acid trip meets H.P. Lovecraft with just all kinds of other weirdness. And Mind the Gap did not work for me. And I don't know why. I mean, it's obviously a really intelligent, clever mystery with all these different strands. I should like it, but I just couldn't care. The artwork maybe is part of it. I found that all the characters looked kind of alike to me, and they just had that. I don't think they're photos, done in Photoshop, but they had that sort of too perfect look to them. But a lot of other people have liked this, and it is a very clever, elaborate thing. This first issue is a great deal. It's huge. It must be at least double size. There's no ads. As you can see, not even an ad on the back cover. I am a little curious how they're going to solve the mystery. There's a lot of stuff about kind of being out of body and limbo between life and death, and it just didn't seem to work well for me there either. But mostly it just didn't make me care somehow, which is a shame, because I think it's quite cool to, see a totally non-superhero, non-standard fantasy or science fiction kind of thing. There might be some fantasy elements here. It's hard to know for sure yet. Or it might all be just psychological. It does it almost feels like someone's taking a movie script or a TV miniseries kind of script and adopting it to comics rather than it being a natural comic book story. And maybe that's part of why it didn't work so well for me. Mark Millar has written this. I'm talking now about Secret Service by Mark Millar and Dave Gibbons. He has written some comics that I enjoyed, especially the Ultimates, Superman Red Sun, but I really hated Wanted, and I hated it on a kind of moral level. I guess it was a black comedy, but it just kind of disgusted me, and I felt like Millar expected us to just get off on it and get off on the violence and being bad, even though he maybe was making fun of the fanboys who love violence and stuff. And I felt like he's claiming to claiming to make fun of it, but really getting off on it. And that's why, after looking at a little bit of Kick-Ass, I avoided that also, which was by Mark Millar. And now he has Secret Service, which seems to be about this guy who's is like a James Bond in the Secret Service of British Secret Service, and he recruits his ne'er-do-well nephew, who lives in the welfare, or the British version of the welfare apartments, and is going nowhere. And whether there's any reason why he should have recruited him, I don't know, or if it's just because of his relatives. And so I think we're going to see the training of the young guy along and the parallel with what the very experienced super spy is up to. The super spy stuff is kind of over the top, and plus we get a lot of gritty violence. Each of the two issues starts with some really over the top violent scene that at this stage in the plot doesn't yet directly apply to things going on in the rest of the story, but clearly is going to tie in later. But I think it's kind of the shtick with each issue, starting with this scene that kind of really shocks you. In the first episode, they kill off a real-life celebrity that's quite shocking, and in a mission that goes completely awry in kind of a funny way. And in the second episode, the bad guys, at least I assume they're the bad guys, they could end up being the good guys, you never know with Mark Millar, are doing something very bloody and awful and shocking. So the reason why I picked it up is when I looked at it, the Dave Gibbons art is beautiful, and I like Dave Gibbons at least when he's really clicking. It's just great stuff, and you can look at it over and over again and notice more details. Dave Gibbons, most famous for The Watchmen, of course, and Martha Washington with Frank Miller. But it's lovely artwork, and so I think I'll keep picking it up for the artwork. I'm just a little nervous that Mark Millar is gonna just make me feel yucky about myself and make me feel like he's just trying to get me off on violence or something. But we'll see if it turns out to be the case. So I think Secret Service is worth keeping an eye on, and Ragemoor, if that sounds like your cup of tea, is definitely worth looking into. I think it's kind of rare at this point, or at any point. It was always hard to find the real Richard Corbin stories. So it's exciting whenever something comes out, and it's from Dark Horse. So you know it's gonna get pretty wide distribution. So talk to all of you later. More to come.